Thank you. 13 years ago, I wrote to the Reserve Bank over here offering to run a seminar on models of debt deflation, how a debt crisis could hit the capitalist economy. And the offer was declined. I find it rather amusing, in a sharp and Freudish sort of way, that today we're in one. And the first seminar I'm giving about it near the Reserve Bank is actually outside to the public. And it's very fitting because the public has more awareness about how the economy functions and malfunctions than the so-called professional economists do. Now, I'm in discussions now. I might finally get inside the Reserve Bank for that seminar in a couple of months' time. But the problem that we're facing now, the reason you're on the streets here, would not exist if the view of the economy that the economists and the Reserve Bank and government officials around the world and the people who dominate academic economics as well were right. Because according to them, the system's always stable. But there's something fundamentally wrong with their vision of how the economy operates, and there's a profound irony as a result of that. Economists are not experts on the economy. I'd even include myself in that. They're experts on a model of the economy. Now, if the model is right, then okay. But the model they've got obviously is wrong. There wouldn't be 1,000 cities around the world that are demonstrating against the failure of the system if it hadn't failed. And I might add on that note, is Melbourne going to be the only city on the planet that doesn't allow a public protest? Do we want to have that way of being different in this country?
No!
Okay. Let's get Melbourne back on the streets again.
Yes!
And back to the economists with their heads in the clouds. Why do they get the world so wrong? Well, they have a set of core beliefs, their little religion, and I really think economics is closer to a bunch of competing religions than it is to a science, is that the economy is always stable and it's either in or near equilibrium. And that money and debt, believe it or not, their models tell them that money and debt are unimportant, which is why they ignored the bubble in debt that grew by a factor of 5 or 6 in this country over the last 30 or 40 years, and by a factor of 6 in America until the crisis began. And they imagine that all of you are what they call rational agents. And it sounds good to be called rational, doesn't it? It's a good word. Only what they mean by rational is capable of accurate prophecy. Anybody rational according to that definition? Obviously they're not, because they didn't see this thing coming. So they've got a nonsense view of how humans work and how the world works, and their ideas are full of theoretical and empirical holes, which is why I wrote Debunking Economics. They give the classic statement about people being in denial, which actually stands for don't even know I am lying. Well, their version of don't even know I'm lying is don't even know I am wrong. And they're still not admitting it today. So protests like you're doing are an essential part of shaking that complacency. Now, at the same time, it's important not to repeat the mistake they made. And that mistake is having a mythical view of how capitalism functions. Because just as you can't manage an economy if you have a mythical view of how it operates, nor can you change it successfully. It'll fall apart. Whatever you might construct. Now, that's in that vision, when you want to understand capitalism, the starting points I have is to say, first of all, money and debt are essential, in the sense that you can't understand capitalism without it, and the reason they didn't see this coming is they leave both debt and money out of their mathematical models. It's no damn wonder they didn't see it coming. They were smashed sideways by what their model tells them to ignore. Secondly, capitalism is fundamentally unstable. That, however, is not totally a bad thing. Part of that instability is why we're walking around with iPods and mobile phones and so on. It's the most innovative, the system which gives them the most capacity for the human capability to innovate. It's undeniable on that front. The trouble is, it also gives rise to the potential for cancerous innovations. Innovations which generate not new technology and new ways of doing things and new thinking, which has affected this movement. This wouldn't exist without that technology. But also which invents new ways of generating schemes that make large amounts of money by gambling on asset prices with borrowed money.
Yes.
And that Ponzi scheme is what's given us the financial crisis. So the cancerous side has taken over under the cover of people who believe they're letting rip the creative instability of capitalism. They've gone far too far in that way, and that's what caused this crisis. Capitalism breaks down when Ponzi merchants take over, and fundamentally they've been running the economy since 1987. Now I'm going to turn academic on you here for a short while. And that is to say, the starting point of understanding the monetary system is to get rid of the myth that you need to have deposits first of all before you can create loans, which is the stuff they teach economic students. The reality is loans create deposits. You walk up to a bank and say, I've got a great idea. The bank says, it's fantastic, we love it, here's $1 million. By the way, you owe us $1 million. That's how money is created. It's that simple. It's double entry bookkeeping. What that means as well is the volume of loans determines the profits that banks make. So they have an inherent desire to create as much debt as they possibly can. Now, that's difficult to some extent. Debt is necessary to finance a bit of personal consumption, new innovation technology, working capital for firms, buying houses when you don't want to rent. That's fair enough. But otherwise, debt's a bad thing. Debt's like having teeth pulled. If you went along to the dentist and said, I have a sore tooth, that's the only one you'd let him pull out. But what if the dentist persuaded you look sexier with less teeth? Well, that's fundamentally what the banks have done to us. They've convinced us to say debt's actually good, because even though it's bad, if you have more of it and prices go up, asset prices, of course, not commodities or wages, if they go up, you'll make more money. So it's actually good to be in debt. And you can see that very simply in the economic data for Australia. Back in 1990, the level of personal debt compared to GDP was about 10%. 2010, it's about 10%. Mortgage debt, which is where you think you see rising prices, back in 1990 was about 20%. It's now about 90%. It's gone up by a factor of 4.5 because banks have persuaded us that gambling on house prices is a sensible thing. No, it's not. It's what's caused a large part of the homelessness and the social discord in our society. To continue being academic, if you want to understand what's going on, the best guide to that is the hypothesis called the financial instability hypothesis developed by Hyman Minsky. And I explain that to some extent in my book. The fundamental argument he makes about capitalism is that stability in a capitalist economy is destabilising. Because we're subject to an uncertain future, when you have a period of tranquil growth, that leads investors, capitalists, speculators to have rising expectations. With those rising expectations, they gamble, and away you go into another bubble. The economy is inherently cyclical, and the reason you have a crisis is largely they'll borrow during a boom, and the borrowing causes the boom. They've got to repay during a slump. And as a result, the debt ratchets up over time, and you finally get a crisis like we have now, when the debt overwhelms the economy. Now, to give an idea of how large that debt is, at the American private debt, and it's private debt that matters. The public debt is not as important by any stretch of imagination. Politicians obsessing about that are chasing the wrong fox. Private debt in America peaked at 300% of GDP in 2009. The peak during the Great Depression was 235%, where we've got a higher debt crisis than they had in the Great Depression. Australia, it's worse. Our debt level peaked at about 160% in 2008. During the Great Depression, it was 75%. We're more than twice as indebted now as we were during the Great Depression. So the crisis we're now going through globally is people reducing their debt levels, and to reduce the debt, you've got to have demand being less than supply, so you can devote part of your income to paying debt down. That's what's causing the permanent crisis, the permanent slump. We're just beginning to feel it in Australia. It's certainly entrenched in the rest of the world. America, in no two ways about it, it's in a depression. They're just taking a while to wake up to it. We face either 20 years more of that through deleveraging, given how long it took after the Great Depression, or what we need is a partial debt jubilee. Dishonourable debt should not be honoured. Now, we need to end delusions as well, and to my way of thinking, often a lot of what's being done here is characterised as left-wing, but I've seen some conservative people here as well talking about their attitudes. It's neither left or right, but realism we need. Now, my contribution to that, and also philosophy and passion about how we want humanity to be, that's neither left nor right. Now, my contribution to that are the book, which I've donated 3 copies here, my blog, debtdeflation.com/blogs, and a YouTube channel where I put my lectures out that hopefully give you a better picture of how capitalism functions than what you'll get from reading a neoclassical textbook. But fundamentally, economics won't reform, economists won't reform economics, and financiers won't reform the financial system. It's a public revolt that's needed, and you're the beginning of it, and I applaud you for it.